The following is a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about them Cowboys?
Yeah! Go Cowboys! This is Girls Talk, Boys Talk, presented by Jigsaw Dating, preferred dating partner of the Dallas Cowboys, and broadcasting live from Dallas Cowboys World Headquarters at the Star.
Welcome into Girls Talk, Boys Talk, brought to you by Jigsaw Dating, the official dating partner of the Dallas Cowboys. Well, the Cowboys were courting OBJ and instead decided to put a ring on T.Y. Hilton. I think a lot of people were probably a little shocked by this one, and I'll admit, when I got a little tip that his agents were in the building here, I immediately got on the phone knowing his agents and made a couple of calls, and everyone said, "How did you know about this?" And of course, I didn't say how. But apparently, the folks I spoke to said we were trying to be covert about this. The discussion with T.Y. happened very quick, guys. The minute they got him in here, remember I brought up the conversation last week that if you truly want a free agent, you don't let him leave the building.
Yep.
Well, it sounds like they didn't let him leave the building. He's been here since Monday in his workout. As he described the workout to me, T.Y. said he was really getting in his groove. He did a couple of moves. They said, we've seen all we need to see. Because I think the big questioning for everybody has been, well, if T.Y. is so great and ready to play, why hasn't he been on an active roster? And Haley, you were able to be there for Avail today, and he gave you an answer on that. But I think this is a great fit. And we'll go around the table and discuss that in a second. But sort of your first impressions from your meeting with him.
Yeah, I just think that he is a really down-to-earth guy. My favorite thing just about listening to him speak today was that he's ready to contribute however this team wants him to contribute. And I think that that's a really special quality for a guy who's coming in at the tail end of a season hoping to help this team be a Super Bowl contender. And so to me, that was the most impressive part. He has been here for, what did he say, like 10 hours every day trying to learn the playbook, getting acclimated to the system and the way they play with Dak and all of that. And so I just find that to be impressive, and it impressive in the sense of I'm not surprised because this is a guy who's a vet. He's, racked up the mileage, so to speak, in this industry. But yeah, I just think that he's going to be a really good fit. He walked into the locker room with a big old smile and was very polite to, our fantastic group of beat reporters who can be a little bit overwhelming at times. And so I think he's a good fit. I think he's going to slide right in. I think he has no issues contributing as like that third guy coming in as insurance, which might have been a concern with OBJ. So I'm curious to see how he works into the lineup and if we get to see him on Sunday, because I know you asked and Mike was very coy.
Well, look, it's going to take some time to get up to speed
Sure.
on the playbook. I think it makes more sense that you're going to see him against the Eagles. And how interesting that Nick Sirianni was once his offensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. Now he's the head coach of the Eagles. And I think that's, it's one element of this, right? It gives you some insight into their playbook. Obviously, that offense, we'll get into some of Micah Parsons' thoughts on the podcast I guess it was this week about Jalen Hurts. But yeah, playbooks change, coaching changes. But I think the biggest thing for me is, as you were talking about, this guy does not need to come in and be CeeDee Lamb. That's not necessarily what they're looking for. They want CeeDee to be that guy. At his age, it makes more sense than even bringing in an aging OBJ. I'm not taking anything away from OBJ's skill set. We've talked about this for the last 2 weeks. If OBJ could have come in here, run a route, they would have written him a check. And
Absolutely.
Jerry still covets it. I don't believe this is just Jerry keeping his name in the news. But I think it says a lot to you guys that Cole Beasley comes out of retirement and plays for the Bills. The Bills desperately needed a wide receiver. The Giants desperately need a wide receiver. But that tells you everything you need to know. The Cowboys weren't the only ones who had concerns about the availability of OBJ. And also with T.Y., I think he can be a little bit of a Jason Peters here. Mm-hmm. He can help these young guys come along a little bit, but he can play multiple spots in the field, and that's going to draw coverage away from CeeDee Lamb and help get him open.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and also, too, you said all the good stuff. Kellen mentioned him being up. Y'all did it. But Kellen mentioned him still having, wheels. He was he still can run, and that's a big part of his game. We've talked about multiple times that that's something that we felt like this Cowboys offense was missing. Also, too, this is my big thing with T.Y., is that I find him very QB friendly. And right now, your quarterback and all the disguises they're throwing at him, a lot of zone defenses they're throwing at him, you need a guy that is experienced and understands the field and can find the soft spot. And that's also why Dalton Schultz went busy on that last drive, because he understands how to sit in the soft spot, sit in the zone, and be available for his quarterback. And some of these younger guys are still learning that. They're still learning that. So you have a guy that comes in here that's QB friendly, is going to fight back to the ball when your quarterback's scrambling, and he will be in the right place at the right time. And that's half the battle. So I'm excited about the addition, and hopefully it pays dividends for them moving forward.
He talked about that today, too, as well, just about coming in and being the veteran leadership for the guys and being able to help, teach them, because the wide receiver room here is very young. So it's interesting you point that out.
Thank you.
And not only that, too, but it's beneficial for him, because go back to when we were talking about OBJ and the medical staff here and the things that they're able to do for these players. It makes sense for him to come in off of injury. And Christy had talked about it on Monday, how before some of his injuries were more lower body, this is a more upper body injury that he's coming off of. And so for him, it makes sense to come to this renowned medical staff to get him in full health and make sure he not only, and Mike McCarthy stresses this all the time, is healthy now, but healthy for the long term going forward. And so I think it's an investment for him and his career for however long he wants to take it as that. And so it makes sense for him. It makes sense for the Cowboys locker room and that veteran presence. And I'm so glad you made the comparison to Jason Peters. We said that on Monday. I think somebody like T.Y. could really bring out what's missing per se from CeeDee Lamb of being the wide receiver one. He can show him the ropes, and he was that guy at one point. So what better guy to show you than the guy that was that person at one point? So I think CeeDee Lamb could really reap the benefits of having T.Y. in the locker room. And then you have up-and-coming Noah Brown, who just came off of the game he had. Oh, my goodness. I can't imagine the impact he's going to have. And it's one of those things you don't get to see per se, but you see it on the field. And so I'm excited to see that.
I think it was a sneaky good signing. Again, I don't think it was necessarily what everyone wanted, but I think it's what the team needed.
Yeah.
When we think about this T.Y. Signing, and look, I think you brought up an interesting point there. I think Amari Cooper helped build up the confidence of the guys in the wide receivers room, and I think that's what's sort of been lacking. I think maybe they've been leaning on Dak for some of that. I think I had an interesting conversation with Mark Sanchez about coaching up young guys, and how Mark had said in his discussions with Dak, it typically takes like 4 attaboys before you give him a criticism. And I think that for that unique position, you sort of need that guy in the room every week that's coaching them up on that level. And then you bring up, it sort of jogged my memory as I was sort of doing some research on T.Y. this week. He almost considered staying away from football after that last injury because it was kind of a weird one. Made him really worried about his long-term health. And of all guys, it was Andrew Luck who essentially came to him and sort of pulled him out of retirement. And he talked about that today. There were other teams that were interested in him, but this was just the right team, the right time. And by the way, at minimum, he's walking out of here with a $600,000 paycheck.
Yeah.
Team-friendly deal. That's what the Cowboys ultimately wanted with OBJ. I don't know what to make of Jerry continuously saying OBJ's name. I think there's going to be some other options in free agency and through the draft next year. I just wonder if the OBJ thing is ever going to actually happen for Dallas. My gut instinct is that it isn't.
Yeah. It's tricky because he's a guy that you don't want to let slip away. I mean, I think we've had that conversation so heavily on this show and just in the building. But it's tricky because you've got to think about the long-term health of this team and the future of this team and what that looks like. And I was just having this conversation with my dad the other day. What are you willing to give up or to sacrifice to get an OBJ in the building? Is OBJ worth not having Tony Pollard back? Is OBJ worth losing CeeDee Lamb potentially? These are, or even on the defensive side, sacrificing some of that defensive depth that has been so essential to this year. What are you willing to do for OBJ? He's very good. I personally don't know that there's much I would love to give up from a star power standpoint from this roster to bring him in to look at next year.
I think if it works out, it works out, right? I think you focus more on what's working this year. You have those conversations postseason, whenever that may be, for this team. And so you have those conversations. You look at the laundry list of free agents that the Cowboys have to worry about leaving at some point, and more than that, replacing. I mean, you're talking having another kicker battle potentially at the end of this season. Brett Maher, a free agent. You have Noah Brown. You have Tony Pollard. Big names that have made a tremendous impact this season so far. And so I think if you can get all those guys, your ducks lined up with them, although we know free agency doesn't always work in the way you want it to, you're going to lose guys. If it works out after you get the guys that you're able to retain post free agency, sure, get an OBJ. But where it stands right now, especially with TY, how does he fit in? Because we also haven't seen James Washington. Keep in mind, he just made his debut. How is he going to ramp up, and what are we going to see out of him? That's another question mark we don't really know much about yet. Where does Odell fit in this now that you have T.Y.? James is on the up and up. You have Noah Brown, who made his, I don't want to call it a comeback game, but made his debut known again, after kind of being silent after Michael Gallup came back. You have Michael Gallup. Where does he fit in at this point?
I think the question is, where does James Washington fit in? Because I know you're a fan of him, and I hope that
that's my pet cat.
I know he's your pet cat, and I hope you prove me wrong on this. But if that was his game to come back from, and the fact that they literally signed a veteran wide receiver after a game against one of the worst teams, if not the worst team in the league, in the Texans, who had one win, their frustration, I think, was the fact that 27 points was the fewest points they'd scored since week 7. There were the miscues. Now, some of this, and I appreciate Dak holding himself accountable. Remember, he talked to us, what was it, last week or the week before, that he'll be the first to say he wants people to tell him when I've messed up. Even he was shocked that he's got 9 interceptions now in his last 8 games. In fact, I think one of the more concerning stats was in my NFL research packet. On passes of 20 yards or more, he's 2 of 9 in his last 3 games. So I don't know what's going on with the deep ball, but that's essentially why. He's throwing behind some of these guys, and so are throwing in front of them, and the guys aren't getting. They talked about the importance of getting precise routes and where they're breaking and making sure that the angles are more precise. And so I think that's why ultimately you needed to get a veteran like T.Y. in here, who's got to learn the playbook, but at least has enough knowledge, not dissimilar from an Amari Cooper, to come here and help this offense, because they have been struggling. Yeah. And I guess my biggest concern about James Washington is, and it may not be fair, it's just I keep looking at what he did with the Steelers. What's going to give me, with Ben Roethlisberger of all people, what's he going to do here in Dallas? But again, maybe he'll come along, and I hope he does. We've talked sometimes, poor Jess, we've talked sometimes about your penalties, and then your penalties were a big deal. So I hope I'm eating crow on James Washington for him and for the wide receiver room and for you.
Well, and I think, too, you can go back to the Amari Cooper comparison, because how productive was Amari Cooper before coming to Dallas?
That's not bad.
So
I'll give you a point on that one.
It's one of those things where you won't know until you see it. And I think with the way the Cowboys have been nursing injuries, and more importantly, nursing injuries when players return, not just giving them this full load, they give them that time to ramp up. I don't think you're going to see a peak James Washington until, honestly, Eagles game, if not postseason.
But that's what's
healthy at training camp is what concerned me.
Yeah, it's just tough, because it's it almost feels like too little too late. And I know that with James Washington, the most frustrating part is that it's nobody's really fault.
Right.
He's a victim of circumstance, and unfortunately, this is a league that doesn't really care about your circumstance. It cares about productivity. And so, unfortunately, I think what you see with James Washington, not that Sunday was going to be his end-all, be-all, this is your debut or your audition to stay in this room, but the reality is very similar to what we talked about with OBJ. The Cowboys want to win now, and I don't know how they feel James Washington can help contribute to that. And like you just said, I think that was kind of determined by bringing in a T.Y. Hilton, because just like the OBJ conversation and having James Washington come back, and that was going to kind of be the, not decider, but to give some context of what they actually needed. I mean, I think he was maybe targeted 3 times, but...
Yeah.
Wow. And then the next guy is Jalen Tolbert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's going on with that?
Well, I talked to him. I talked to him very early in the year and touched base with him, and because I was very high on Jalen coming out of college, so I got some information from him. And this offense is not the easiest to learn. It is not, and that's one thing I wanted to comment in regard to some of Dak Prescott's interceptions and stuff. Some of the interceptions, there are instances where he's making mistakes, but some of them also too are scheme. They're guys running the same routes. It's guys not being in the right spot. There's some miscommunication and some stuff going on between them. Also, these defenses that's something that's happening as well, is that Dak is becoming known for what he does at the line of scrimmage and how much he moves, how much he shifts things, what teams are doing. They're disguising coverages and changing them post snap. And so he's having to adjust to that feel or whatever. It took him, throughout this past game to figure it out. But once he gets it, he gets it. But this is something that we're starting to see trickle down as people are like, we know you can beat us at the line of scrimmage. We're going to make you beat us post-snap. And this is another tick in his game I'm sure he's going to answer the call for.
I want to stop you there so we can take our first break. But I want to get into that because did you guys catch the comment from Mike McCarthy talking about how he thinks Jacksonville should scheme things up defensively based on their last 2 games?
Oh, yeah. He was talking about the...
Hold it. Let's talk about on the other side of the break because I think that was really, really interesting. Is it blueprint?
It's...
I don't think it is.
Nah.
I'll give my thoughts on it. You guys wait for your thoughts on it. We'll talk about that after this first break. This is Girls Talk, Boys Talk, brought to you by Jigsaw Dating, the official dating partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
At Jigsaw Dating, we obviously want the Cowboys to bring that 6th ring home. But to be honest, we're more focused on finding the person who will put a ring on your finger. That's why we created a dating app that reveals your face through meaningful conversation, so you can date deeper. Because it's personality that matters the most, not looks. Join Jigsaw Dating today, dating partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
All right, Pepsi-loving football fans, it's time we had a lesson in trash talk. And I'm not talking about that stuff that happens on the field. What I'm talking about is trash, and it's the only thing that belongs in your garbage can. Now, recycling might not be as thrilling as converting a 4th and long, but next time you're thinking about throwing that Pepsi Zero Sugar bottle away, just cap it back up and pretend you're down by 6 with the recycling bin wide open. Know the difference? Make a difference. Be a team player and recycle. Visit PepsiTrashTalk.com to learn more.
I'm Dak Prescott, quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys.
And they snap it to Prescott, who looks right. It's not there. He escapes left. He'll run for a first down.
Just like football, when it comes to crypto, it's important to have a team you can trust. With blockchain.com, I know I'm in good hands. Since 2011, they've been trusted by millions around the world to buy, sell, and trade cryptocurrency.
Prescott's going to run this himself. Run it up the middle, and he scores.
Whether you're new to crypto or an active trader, they've got you covered. What are you waiting for? Get started at blockchain.com.
Welcome back to Girls Talk, Boys Talk, brought to you by Jigsaw Dating, the preferred dating partner of the Dallas Cowboys. But first, Jess.
Snag your Christmas gifts while enjoying festive sips during the Christmas Sip and Stroll in the Star District on December 15th. Enjoy holiday tastings, Christmas music, and photo moments, exclusive shopping offers, complimentary gift customization, carolers, hot cocoa, and much, much more during our Sip and Stroll featuring 15-plus participating shops and restaurants. Visit thestardistrict.com to get your tickets.
All right, guys, I picked up on something as I was prepping for this game this week to sort of give you an idea of how I get going for the week ahead of Sundays. I do a bunch of going through the notes, going through the sound, and there was just something that Mike McCarthy said that sort of stood out to me this week when he was talking about the way Houston played them. And I wanted to get your thoughts on this, Aisha, because you really sort of get into the nitty-gritty of the film. My eyes are sort of everywhere as a reporter. I don't know if that's you too, Haley, because we have so many questions to ask post-game. It's like, just to peel the curtain back, I will literally do my post-game interview, and I will have 3 questions for 3 different position players. And so you never know where you're going to go, but you've got to keep up with how does this storyline relate to this particular player. Yep. So sometimes it's kind of maddening at the end of the game. But you really zone in on the film. And Mike McCarthy said that they were playing a different type of zone coverage than they had seen before. And even remember when he talked about Lovie Smith last week. This is a coach that he's played more games against. And the other thing that I loved was he said, you got to be careful with Houston, despite their record, ball security. They do really good with it. That seemed to be the theme of the game. So Mike knew all of this going into the game. And they still made him really work for this until that 98-yard drive at the end of the game with less than 3 to go. So when you looked at this, what kind of looks were they giving from a zone perspective? And then he went a step further and he said, if I was Jacksonville's defensive coordinator, I'd be doing vision coverage based on the last 2 games. What does Mike mean by that?
I mean, I'm still learning, y'all. Like, I'm still learning, but the way that it was explained to me is that when you play vision defense, and the way that it is that these guys are describing, they played a lot of cover 2, so you got 2 safeties, and they would just act like they were running something. They looked like they were in a cover 1, they dropped into a cover 2. There was a play where the safety just came out of nowhere, and Dak didn't see him. Like, they disguised a lot of coverages. They showed something different. They would show cover 2. Or they would show cover 1, they drop into a cover 2. They also, Christy talked about quarters, and that means that you have people on both sides, everywhere. So sideline to sideline, they were difficult to get around, but these DBs were just biting on everything because with vision defense, it's just get to your spot and look for the ball. Turn around, look for the ball, find the ball. And that makes it easier on I guess I would call them ball hawking DBs. You had a lot of ball hawking DBs out there. So also the way that this receiver core is working, and the way that Kellen designs receiving, passing plays, a lot of these guys are put in positions where they have to win on their own, where they have to win their matchup. And when you do that, and you're not consistently just scheming these guys open, it's easier for these guys to bite on it because we've talked about how much separation are these receivers getting. And so when you pair that with not that much separation and vision defense, you're going to get a lot of tip balls. You're going to get a lot of that, and that's what happened with Dak.
11
and there was
tipped.
Yeah, and they got their hands on a lot of balls, but also too, we talked about the pressure as well that was coming, during this game as well. But that to me is a big part of it. It's not just Dak Prescott. It's also how do we put them in better positions to not keep making these mistakes, running the same routes, being in the same areas, and things like that.
So how do you fix it? If he's essentially saying, that's what I would do, he's sort of, I look at it as a little bit of a bait and switch. Mm-hmm. Yeah, stick to that, but we are going to change things up a little bit offensively this week. How would you change things up offensively? I mean, what is the answer?
Well, I'm still learning, but I think a good start is a TY. I think
if he can play on Sunday.
A good start right now is a TY, a guy that understands how to sit in a zone and be where he's supposed to be. But then also too, he's also a guy that when he can play, if he's healthy, if he's the guy we hope he is, he can get open by himself. And that, to me, really changes the rest of the receiving core and how they operate. And then you saw Dalton Schultz start to come alive this game, and it was because of the amount of zone. So I would start there from here, and maybe I'll have more answers tomorrow.
I don't know about you guys. I always love teeing her up sometimes because I learn.
I was just
we're all taking notes.
Even after covering this game, I always tell people, I've learned the X's and O's over the years, but I'm a news and information person. But it's so much easier to be good at news and information when you know what to look for and ask better questions. So I always appreciate your insight on here, Aisha. And I love that. I always love somebody who can also say, I'm still learning. That's why a lot of times when I'm in the locker room and I'm asking these guys, I'm like, hey, I've got a dumb question for you because I am still learning. So I hope that our listeners, as they have stuck with us on this podcast, they sort of walk away and are learning alongside some of us. Haley, what were some of your thoughts this week when you look at this offense and, how do they get into a little bit more of a rhythm?
I've thought about this a lot, and I feel like Sunday's game is such a blur because we spent so much time sitting on the edge of our seat waiting for the Cowboys to show up to the game. And so I spent so much time analyzing that last drive and what made it effective and bringing in Jason Peters just as a spark. And while I don't think that's a long-term move, I just think they needed a spark.
But why not? Do you trust Josh Ball over Jason Peters at right tackle?
Please.
I don't, but I just think Jason Peters he's old. And I hate saying that because I'm not trying to dog him for who he is, but there is certain things that as we get older, we can do less, right? And we can still be good at them, but we can't be good at them at the capacity of which we have been throughout our career. And so I think it was great that he was able to get in there and, step up for his team. I think that proved his value to, a fan base or even, reports of why they brought him in. So I thought that was fantastic for him. But I mean, Mike even talked about it. Like he's an older guy. They don't know if he can do 70 plus snaps at that position. But saying that, as I was thinking about it more, I was like, like Jason Peters was that spark. It kind of feels like that's kind of what the offense always needs, is a spark, because it feels like when this team plays, when they're playing well, they need something almost like to motivate them, is kind of how it feels. And so, to your point, bringing in a T.Y. Hilton to add that extra layer, to add that extra incentive to have more offensive firepower, I think that is a benefit. But really, it just comes down to, they talk about it all the time, but the focus. I really think that the focus is something as simple as it is. That's got to be the emphasis. I mean, like the fact that we're asking Dak Prescott about these interceptions, like the volume at which he is throwing interceptions. I don't care how aggressive you want to play. There's a difference between playing aggressively and playing smart. And I just think that the excuse of I want to be aggressive is fine, but I don't want you to be aggressive when you're backed up into the end zone and you're trying to throw these aggressive balls when Michael Gallup is double covered and you're trying to force that in there. To me, that's not aggressive. That's not smart.
It's not everyone's Patrick Mahomes, right?
Yeah.
Like we've seen Patrick Mahomes play street ball and sort of improvise out there. And I'm not taking anything away from
Me neither.
From Dak Prescott, because not every quarterback can do what he did on that 98-yard play.
Absolutely.
I think to your point when you talk about spark, I think Tyron Smith really helps. But did you catch the nugget from Mike McCarthy today when he said Tyron Smith's been playing some left tackle and left guard? I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Why throw that out there?
Well, if he said that, then that's going that
Because we
that
keep
get me a little excited, because
right.
we moved Tyler over the right
remember
tackle.
we kept being told well, we kept it's interesting, and even when we were talking about what positions people were playing on the line, he said, I think I'm going to wait this one out till Sunday. I think I can get by with it. So I'm going to be curious to see if that offensive line is how we're all sort of grading it out as we think it will be, or if they're going to throw something else at us.
That's a good point that you made in regard to him being a little older or whatever the case may be, too, because when he's playing a totally different position. So we already know that with a lot of the rules and stuff, like offensive lines, they don't get a whole bunch of time. So that's number one. Number two, he is an older guy. Mike McCarthy definitely kind of splits up how much time in practice they're getting during the week. He, learning an almost new position, would have to have that practice time, again, going into your point about him having fresh legs moving into the rest of the season. I'm concerned about that part as well, is that he is older.
You also have to remember the brunt of the hits that your O-line takes throughout every single game and practice. That's why their bodies don't hold up as well as other positions maybe do. And so with that too, Haley, to your point, like you had said, it's an age thing, but it's also, you can want to do all the snaps and you can want to play the full game in its entirety, but is your body going to hold up? You can't decide that. That's really, it's a product of circumstance, like you said earlier. You can't decide how well your body is going to hold up when you've been playing as long as you have. And especially, I guess what worries me with shifting him around at the drop of a hat, even though he's a veteran and he can do that, is that's breaking muscle memory, and could it open up a door a little bit more for potential injury at that point? That's what worries me a little bit with it. But also, the versatility you have within your O-line still, despite the loss of Terrence Steele, is pretty incredible when you think about it. I mean, you have 3 future Hall of Famers within that O-line. It's a shame, and the Cowboys are doing themselves a disservice if they're not playing to the full extent that they can with this O-line.
It is fascinating. They're moving guys across this line, because I just remember a couple of years ago when we were toying with the idea of Zach Martin moving over to the left side, and we talked so much, and I did reports on how different the right side is with just your footwork, your vision, things along those lines, and yet we're doing it in game. I mean, my interview, and Patrick also talked with him when I was there. How did that whole thing come to be? And it's stuff that goes into his Hall of Fame, like his portfolio. And it's fascinating. Little sidebar here. When Shireen Williams, she gets a vote in the Hall of Fame, they literally put together these huge binders, and they go and they make a case for each player each year. And who was it? Charles Haley. I think she spent several years trying to get him in the Hall of Fame. But I think that game against the Texans is going to be a part of that binder, because he described it. Terrence Steele goes out. Josh Ball's in. You see the Texans get their hand on Dak. Then he throws an interception, and internally he's going, I need to go in there. But he hasn't played since 2005. You'd have to literally go back all the way to the Buffalo Bills to find tape when he played that position. But as he said to me, he thought in his head at that moment, no, you don't want to be the reason we lose this game. And simultaneously, the offensive line coach, Joe Philbin's walking towards him and says, you're going in. And it was able to sustain that line. And then when I asked him, I said, are you prepared to continue to play? He said, if that's what it takes for us to get to Arizona, yeah. And so I actually don't have a problem with Jason Peters there. I actually think we haven't put a lot of tread on his tires here in Dallas, where I think that he's had enough time to get acclimated. I think he's had enough rest on his body. I am concerned with, we talk about Mike McCarthy easing up on the practice schedule. They're going to have a padded practice tomorrow. Today was a walkthrough. I don't know how many live reps necessarily he's getting out there to sort of get his body, to your point, the muscle memory and the conditioning. But I'm sorry, as I sit here right now after seeing what I just saw from Josh Ball in the Texans game, I feel good with Jason Peters.
Yeah, we did talk about that in the press box, just the, not risk reward, but, if it came down to a Josh Ball or a Jason Peters, I think I lean more Jason, but it's just, I don't know. It just, I think I feel like too, I have PTSD because of all of these offensive linemen are getting banged up, and it's now the worst time that, I don't want to say Jason Peters is our last hope, but at the same time, it's I don't want something to happen to him.
But hey, credit to Joe Philbin and Mike McCarthy.
Absolutely.
I mean, the fact that this is the first team to go back-to-back double-digit win seasons, given all of the injuries, not to just we're talking big players. We're talking starting players. You've lost your 2 starting corners. You lost your starting left tackle. You lost your quarterback. Your 2 wide receivers took forever to come along. Now you've lost. Who would have thought we were talking about Terrence Steele the way we're talking about him? Last year, everyone was incredulous the way this offseason. I'll never forget at Combine listening to Mike McCarthy and these guys sing the praises of Terrence Steele. But when you lost Tyron Smith, you thought the sky was falling. You got a rookie in Tyler Smith that's done so well. But this team hasn't gone back-to-back 10-win seasons since 2005, 2006. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. And as much as we've knocked them about their free agency, look at bringing in some of these guys like the Malik Hookers, the Jason Peters, how they've been able to get through without big splashes. So there's your attaboy for the Cowboys and the front office for what they've been able to do. Let's go ahead and scout a little bit of this Jacksonville team. Of course, we'll really deep dive into them tomorrow, and we'll get some more locker room sound. Not a lot there today, and then we'll give you an updated injury report when we come back. But don't sit on these Jacksonville Jags, particularly Trevor Lawrence, who hasn't been, I don't think he's thrown an interception in his last 5 games, which is wild. We've got more of that coming up. It's Girls Talk, Boys Talk, brought to you by Jigsaw Dating, the preferred dating app of the Dallas Cowboys.
At Jigsaw Dating, we obviously want the Cowboys to bring that 6th ring home. But to be honest, we're more focused on finding the person who will put a ring on your finger. That's why we created a dating app that reveals your face through meaningful conversation, so you can date deeper. Because it's personality that matters the most, not looks. Join Jigsaw Dating today, dating partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
All right, Pepsi-loving football fans, it's time we had a lesson in trash talk. And I'm not talking about that stuff that happens on the field. What I'm talking about is trash, and it's the only thing that belongs in your garbage can. Now, recycling might not be as thrilling as converting a 4th and long, but next time you're thinking about throwing that Pepsi Zero Sugar bottle away, just cap it back up and pretend you're down by 6 with the recycling bin wide open. Know the difference? Make a difference. Be a team player and recycle. Visit PepsiTrashTalk.com to learn more.
With Smoothie King's original Angel Food and new Angel Food Slim without added sugar, you no longer have to choose between treating yourself and hitting your goals this summer. You don't have to choose between great taste and feeling great. Because at Smoothie King, every blend is made with whole fruits and no syrups, so you can satisfy your cravings without compromise. The only choice you will need to make is which one is best for you. Try our classic Angel Food or the new Angel Food Slim, blended without added sugar. Smoothie King, rule the day.
Welcome back to Girls Talk, Boys Talk, brought to you by Jigsaw Dating, the preferred dating partner of the Dallas Cowboys. But first, Jess.
In case you missed it, Cowboys Nation, a new game day staple has just arrived, introducing the Cowboys and True brand hats. Head to the nearest pro shop or log on to shop.dallascowboys.com, a Fanatics experience, to get your favorite style today.
All right, let's talk about this Jacksonville Jags team. They are not the Jags team that we've come to know in the last couple of seasons. Last year, an absolute failure. During the break, we were talking. I was there at Trevor Lawrence's pro day and covered that one, and so impressed with him just as a person, the way that Clemson talked about him and the way that he led. This was a guy I was told that when he came to Clemson, most quarterbacks typically say, "When am I going to start?" Never asked the question. And the way he handled all that stuff with Urban Meyer last year and all of the stories that came out after. And Doug Peterson is easily one of my favorite coaches in the league. So glad to see him doing what he's doing in Jacksonville. But Trevor Lawrence hasn't thrown a pick in his last 5 starts. 5 wins for the Jags this season, their most since 2019. They've got all sorts of players on their team. Christian Kirk tied for second most red zone touchdowns in the NFL. And the Jags are 3-0 when Zay Jones has 70 or more receiving yards. So just some fun facts as we talk about the Cowboys. When Trayvon Diggs has 1 or more interceptions going back to 2020, the Cowboys are, they are 13-2. So you need at least 1 interception from Trayvon Diggs going up against a guy who hasn't thrown a pick in his last 5 starts. What stands out to you guys about the play of Trevor Lawrence? And when we look at this defense who, last week, we weren't seeing the defense that we were used to, and it was particularly against a team, which, by the way, was caught off guard by the alternating quarterbacks.
Yeah,
the Houston Texans game. That was some next-level game planning by Lovie Smith.
Oh, he said he threw everything at them. It was next level, but
they had nothing to lose.
I literally was like, now, come on, y'all. Like for real, Driscoll.
You know what's funny?
Now he's on the 53.
A lot of Texans fans, and I had a guest on one of the podcasts I do with Blogging the Boys that talked about how the Texans were taking this as their Super Bowl.
It was serious.
They were dead set on beating the Cowboys. This was
Almost
their Super Bowl. This was their Super Bowl. This was the equivalent of as close as they're going to get to their version of the Super Bowl. So yeah, they had nothing to lose, but they had everything to gain out of potentially winning it. And yeah, they almost did have it.
Well, you asked what we saw from Trevor Lawrence and what do we see from him. I just see a guy figuring it out. Like, he also has a coaching staff. I think Press Taylor's doing a really good job with getting him comfortable early in games with just short passes, and they're not afraid to show off his arm either. They also went out and got some talent from him, like you were just talking about with the Christian Kirk and some of these guys. Like, they brought in guys. They also have a couple of running backs who can get after it. Their offensive line is not the best at run blocking, but they can pass block their tail off. So again, this defensive line last game didn't get a whole bunch of pressure, oddly, because they were getting the ball out. Hopefully you put Trevor in situations where he has to sit back there a little longer and give your guys a chance, because some of last week was just the D-line was not able to really get set to get pressure, and they were able to get passes on the outside because of the lack of pressure there.
I like that Trevor has always been Trevor.
Yeah.
Like, I think when he was at Clemson, he was very easily a superstar, and that has translated. And it's unfortunate that he went into the dumpster fire that has been the Jaguars for so long. But like you said, I think he's just figuring it out. Like, this is a guy who's coming off of dropping 368 yards, 3 touchdowns to the air, and 1 on the ground against a Titans team that is, supposed to be this fantastic. And not that they're not fantastic, but
in Tennessee.
Yeah. So I just think he's really figuring it out. I think now he's starting to utilize weapons very similar to how the Cowboys are operating, that it wasn't going to be something that happened overnight when it came to figuring out how the offense was going to run or, whatever it is. But I just think he's so poised. That was something that has always impressed me about him. Like, even going back to Clemson, he's always just been so poised. He never gets rattled, which is it's such a crazy thing to me as a quarterback, a young quarterback, being in that scenario where you're constantly losing, you're not being set up for success, and it's never affected him. So for me, I know that we've talked a lot about, that Colts game, the Texans game, and this game kind of being the easier part of the schedule. But as this has gone on, this game kind of terrifies me a little bit because you've very similar to the Texans. You've got a team that really, not that they don't have something to lose, but now all of a sudden they're in postseason conversations. They're in a conference that is a little bit more competitive than what we thought it was going to be at the beginning of the season. And you're playing the Cowboys. This is a matchup that doesn't happen very often. So I just think this one has the recipe. We've been saying trap game for the last 4 weeks. But I really think that this one has a recipe of, we can't have those interceptions we just talked about with Dak. We can't have the miscommunications that we've had on both sides of the ball as of late, because this is a team that has proven time and time again that it doesn't matter how far they're down. They've found a way to rally back. So this to me is...
Well, I was going to say, I love that you brought some of that up, that when we look at the schedule, sometimes your record doesn't always reflect how good of a team you are.
I got it written down and say, don't let, this is another
Okay,
case
so
of
this
don't
is a
let it
5-8 team. They're second in the AFC South. AFC South is the AFC South, right?
Yep.
But let's look at their win week 2, came against Indianapolis. They shut out the Colts 24-0. Then they go to the Chargers, beat them 38-10. All right. But then let's look at they went to Philly October 2nd. If I asked you guys what you think the score of that game is.
Oh, I remember that game.
What would you guys say?
I remember that game.
It's probably close. It's probably about a 3-point.
It was a 1-point game, wasn't it?
A 1-point game.
Well, they ended up losing that game. They lost 21-29. Okay. But
at one point, it was a 1-point game, and it was
played the Eagles close. All right. So let's go look at another game. The Giants were pretty formidable this year, right? Let's go week 7, October 23rd. Lost that one 17-23. Now let's go. Their other win was against Vegas, 27-20.
In a game that they were trailing 17-0. I want to throw that out there.
Yeah. Say that.
Okay. Kansas City Chiefs. How'd they play them? Well, 17-27. Okay. This isn't a team that's laid down, is my point. They beat Baltimore 28-27. At Detroit, they lost 14-40, so they got just destroyed. I mean, how about the Lions and Dan Campbell?
I don't want to talk about
They're
them.
getting good.
I don't want to talk about them.
And then we talked about this win on the road against the Titans, 36-22. So my point in saying all of this is they're not a terrible team.
Yeah.
I mean, defensively, they're in a bottom of a lot of categories, or mid of the pack. They're sort of mid of the pack when it comes to the offense, but when I look at the last 2 games from the Cowboys, Haley, you shouldn't sleep on this one.
No, and I'm telling you, like, that is what has been scary is, you know, like, even with that Colts game, it wasn't until the fourth quarter that you were like, okay, like,
right,
we can do this. And then now last week, it's the last 2 minutes of the game or whatever it is that you're like, okay, we can do this. And so it's a formidable matchup because, as we've said so many times, and as Mike McCarthy has said so many times, like, it's difficult to get wins in this league. And I think if the last 2 weeks have proven anything, I know that Cowboys have dropped in rankings and there's been chatter about them being frauds or whatever it is. But I think this is the part of that schedule where you go, no, like, it is difficult to get wins. And this is another team where last week I really enjoyed how much they talked about being focused. I don't know that was executed as well as it could have been on Sunday. So I'm interested to see if that talk gets backed up with going on the road again and going to Jacksonville and kind of proving that out.
Jane, real quick, who did they play before last week? And what was the score of that?
Detroit.
Okay. And
14-40.
Okay. So it's interesting because Peterson talked about that was the embarrassment of the year, is what he said in his press conference, was that specific game. But they bounced back to beat Tennessee, as we know. But that's the first time they've beat Tennessee in Tennessee since 2013. So that was a big win for them for more reasons. They very much so, very Cowboys-esque, coming back from Green Bay to come back and then beat Minnesota like they did. That was the same kind of comparison from the loss to the Lions to their win against the Titans. So I just wanted to make that comparable real quick. Also, it's very interesting is you look at, I listen to these head coaches every week and how they talk about their players and what they're working with. And some are easier to listen to than others, I will say that. But what I really, really appreciated about listening to Doug Peterson talk about Trevor Lawrence was he said that basically they're now establishing this communication. They established the communication, but more than importantly, he knows Trevor now. He knows what works for him, he knows what he likes, and he knows what he has confidence in within the offensive scheme. And so he's playing up on their strengths. What's funny enough, defensively, and we can get more into this tomorrow, but he was asked about the Cowboys O-line and they said, well, there's rotation, Tyron Smith could be coming back. What do you make of that? And he said, quote, "We've got answers for that." So
well, remember, Doug Peterson has a lot of familiarity with this Cowboys team, having played in the division. Now he's got a losing record against the Cowboys, 4-6 as the Eagles head coach. He's 1-1 against Mike McCarthy. But, I think that they're sort of figuring things out. And I just keep going back to that remarkable Super Bowl run by the Philadelphia Eagles when Doug Peterson had not one but two quarterbacks that helped him get there. And so I love seeing him work with a young Trevor Lawrence. And like I said, just a little bit of a little appetizer for you guys. We'll really sort of deep dive into this matchup tomorrow. And, of course, we'll have more locker room sound. I think it's going to be interesting. Are we going to hear from Dak tomorrow since we didn't hear from him today?
We should. Yeah, locker room today was
interesting schedule today.
Pointless. Yeah, but, I mean, it's just hard because those guys, their schedule is so mixed up. And then, they don't really want to talk because they're all over the place. So I'm trying to think who I even spoke to. I spoke to CD a little bit just off to the side, just common chatter. But yeah, they were all it felt more like a Monday today, I think, than it did a Wednesday.
Yeah, that's why, the schedule's sort of interesting today. But I will be, after they've had a couple of days to look at the tape, I am just curious their thoughts because we talk about that sort of sluggish start. Poor Kevontae Turpin, man. Right out of the gate, it seemed to sort of set the tone. It felt like Murphy's Law in that game. Anything that could go wrong did. And they came out with a number of injuries. We don't have an injury report today yet because the schedule was a little bit messed up. But we do have some updates on some of the guys. As we said, we've got Terrence still heading to IR.
Jonathan Hankins is on IR. But the thing with Hankins is that they are expecting him to hopefully be back for the playoffs. So that's a positive. Yep. Obviously, Terrence won't be here. But then they also signed a cornerback right as we were coming in here. So a guy from Arizona.
So we'll get into a little bit more of that tomorrow. Then we'll also sort of talk playoff scenarios. Cowboys win and in, but then there's also some other situations that with a little bit of help, they could find themselves there. And I'm really looking forward to the Seahawks-49ers game on Thursday Night Football tomorrow night. That should be a good one.
Brock Purdy.
How about Brock Purdy? All right, well, that's going to do it for Girls Talk, Boys Talk. But we also, like I said, we'll have matchups. And Jess has been doing a lot of homework for us on some of the playmakers that we need to be keeping an eye on if you are a Cowboys fan. So tune in tomorrow. We appreciate you tuning in today, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.